Anybody who did not get the questions, go ahead and raise your hand, and Jason will get one of those to you. I forgot to send them out an email to this time. I went to Bowling Green this week, took Anne-Marie to Bowling Green, and I was real busy.
When you see me come back out of the copy room, raise your hand again, because I see I need at least 4 copies.
All right.
But I'll have a stack in just a few minutes, and if you just raise your hand when I come back out, I'll get you if we won't interrupt.
All right, so let's go ahead and have a word of prayer before we begin. God, we thank you for marriage. We thank you for relationships in general, that you put us with other people, that you knew it wasn't good for us to live our life in isolation, and so that you brought us together, for some of us, with spouses, and you brought all of us together with your people so that we can be part of a spiritual family, and we can encourage one another, and we can help one another get to heaven. You know us so well, and you know that we need other people in our life, and we're so thankful for that. Help us as we study this morning, that we'll learn a little bit more about the roles that husbands and wives are to play with one another, have with one another, and how they're supposed to treat one another. We love you. We pray that you'll be with our study. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so this class is really just an introduction to relationships of marriage and family. We're only going to spend 4 weeks, I think, or 4 class periods on marriage. We'll spend some class periods on parenting. We've already talked about some generic aspects of it. We're even going to talk about how to get along with in-laws and things like that, how to deal with adult children when they live in your house still, all that good stuff we're going to talk about. And the hope is that we'll take this introductory course and launch into some more specific courses. So maybe have an entire class or some kind of a special weekend on parenting, have an entire class on marriage, and so you can sort of get deeper into the subject and maybe have some more talk at that time as it maybe closer or smaller crowds. So that's sort of the hope that we're going to be able to do here. So today we're going to talk about, it's lesson 3, it's called Love and Respect in Marriage. And I think it's an important topic for us to talk about. So as we get ready to go, I want to make a couple points here. And these should not be profound points, but sometimes in our culture today they are. Men and women are different. Right? There's just no doubt about it. Men and women are fundamentally different. It's not just the roles that God has put for them to play. It's in creation. God made them different. And so sometimes in our society, we try to blur that line. We try to make men and women the same, and that they have no differences and they have no specialties. And that's just robbing us of our relationships with one another. If you're expecting your wife to think and act and reason through things and feel like you feel, you're going to be in for a rough ride. If you're a wife and you're expecting your husband to just to be able to read your mind and know instinctively how you feel always without you communicating to him, well, you're in for a rough ride too. So we have to start out with this premise that men and women are different. However, there is overlap. Not all men are the same and not all women are the same. So in this idea of being a man, there's sort of a pendulum of how everybody is. And as far as being a woman, there's a pendulum and there's overlap, just like our talk today. We're going to talk about how men need respect primarily and women need love primarily. That doesn't mean that men don't need love or that women don't need respect. Those are things that we all need. A wife doesn't say, you know what, I just want my husband to love me. I don't care if he respects me or not. Well, that's not true. And a man's like, hey, I want my wife to respect me. That's the most important thing ever, and I don't care if she loves me or not. That's not true. But there is a truth that men need respect in a different level, in a different way than women, and women need love in a different way than men. And so I think that's important for us to note. And as men and women are different, I think it's also important for us to understand men and men are different. And women are different. What I'm trying to say is we're all individuals. And although it is helpful to look at the way God created us and do some, if you want to, stereotyping, in your marriage you have to be careful that you're not bringing in all those stereotypes of what a man's supposed to be like that you've developed throughout your entire life and assume that your particular husband is going to meet all those stereotypes, because he's probably not. He's going to be different than some other men. And so men and women are different, but men and men are different, and women are different. And we're all individual people, and that's the beauty of our marriages, because it gives us that opportunity to figure all that out and to understand how my particular wife is different than your wife, and how I need to interact with her might be different. And how you interact based on your personalities. We have different personalities. So if your personality as a woman is way different than my personality is, or my wife's personality, we're going to have to treat our wives differently because they're just different. And so although we can deal with some basic rules and guidelines, you're going to have the homework, if you will, lifelong homework of just trying to figure out and appreciate and love just one man or just one woman as God has designed it. And that's a lot better than having to understand and figure out that all women are all men. Do you agree with that? All right, so that's I wanted to say that as we begin. The other thing I want to make sure that we understand, when you made marriage vows, when you got married, you made unconditional and predetermined vows on how you were going to act for the rest of your life. You committed to that, and you determined that this is how I was going to treat my spouse, regardless of how they treated you. As we were young, got married, maybe we didn't think about that, but that's the truth. How many of you, raise your hand if this is true of your vows. How many of you had a lot of ifs in your vows? You had the word if in there a lot? I promise to love and respect him if he loves and respects me. I mean, I will live with him in better, but not worse. In sickness, but not, if he's healthy, it'll be great. We didn't have that. That's by design. So we determined when we got married and we vowed before God that we were going to treat our spouse this particular way, regardless if they treated us that particular way. And if both of us are working at it, it's going to be a beautiful thing. And sometimes it does become a challenge if only one of us is working on that. And today we're going to talk about Ephesians chapter 5 quite a bit. And it could be considered a controversial passage, one that a lot of people don't like talking about, but I think it is an important one for us to discuss. So you can go ahead and turn to Ephesians chapter 5. Hopefully you had a chance to read that before class. I know many of us have read that multiple times in our life. And so we're going to answer some of these questions. Just fill in the blanks. If you had a chance to fill in the blanks, I'm going to pause for a second when it comes to a blank. If it's not at the beginning of a sentence, if it's at the beginning of the sentence, it would be a long pause. So I'll just say this. Ephesians chapter 5:21 says, we're to submit to one another in the fear of God. So submitting, as this whole section starts out, it's a mutual thing. There are times when a husband submits in a different way than maybe a wife submits, but we submit our desires, our wills, and a lot of times for our wives. It's a different concept. We're to submit to one another. Mutual submission is the context of all that follows. We are constantly one another submitting to one another. So both husbands and wives submit to each other. All right, so motivation in the, you guys filling around your blanks there. Are you following me, or am I just making stuff up? Do I hand out the wrong outline? And fear, there you go, thank you. Fear of God. So reverence for Christ, not selfish ambition. And this prevents the husbands from being tyrants and the wives maybe feeling like they're not treated properly, they're treated less than their husbands, and that's definitely not how God intends whatsoever. So I read a book on my trip back and forth to Bowling Green. I listened to it. And there was this diagram that I thought was very important. It's called The Crazy Cycle. It's a book called Love and Respect. And in this particular book, it's interesting because there's another book that I've also read that just talks, the title is Love Your Husbands as Christ Loved the Church. And of course, that particular book is focused solely on the husband's responsibility. This one's sort of a mixture. But I will say this book brings up some things that we don't talk about very much, and I think it is helpful. And it does have an emphasis placed on the woman's role in showing respect to her husband. But if you see this, he calls it the crazy cycle. And it says here, without love, she reacts without respect. And then he reacts without love. And then she reacts without respect. And then he reacts without love. And it's just this continual cycle that some families go through, some marriages go through. Now, most of our marriages aren't 25 years of this or 50 years of this. But most of our marriages do have these cycles occasionally where the man will do something where he's not showing love. And then her reaction to that is to do something that doesn't show respect. And then his reaction to that is do something that doesn't show love. And her reaction to that is doing something that doesn't show. So it just keeps going on and on until you get a way to get out of that cycle. So this particular person suggested, if your wife does something that is not showing respect, the way that you're not feeling respected in the moment, he just simply says something, I'm sorry, sweetie, I must not have shown you the love that you needed. And she knows immediately that she said something to him or treated him in a way that wasn't respectful in his eyes, and at the same time, it's not accusatory. So, you know what, I probably caused this. I probably didn't respond to you in a way that was showing love to you. Therefore, you weren't responding in a way that shows respect to me. And that's how they end this cycle when they see it. And usually, he says, it almost always in their relationship, since they've been working on this, it slows them down and says, I'm sorry. Because they both end up apologizing to each other, and they said, let's just start over. Somebody has said that before. I think it might be the Welches. I'm sorry if I'm bringing that out of context. I'm giving someone credit or blame for something that's not theirs. But basically, if they're having some kind of a conversation that's not going the right way, they'll just say, all right, do over. Let's just start this entire conversation over. So that means we're just going to forget how I treated you and what I said to you. You're going to forget how I responded, and we're just going to pretend like we're just starting over. That's sort of their way of breaking the cycle. If this cycle is starting in their relationship, let's just break the cycle. Let's admit that we're in the cycle. Let's just break it, erase it, and start over. So I think what we're trying to accomplish in our marriages is not getting that cycle very often. And when we get in that cycle, have an off-ramp that we can take pretty quickly to get out of that cycle so that we don't bear grudges and have resentment as we go along. Another thing, a point that he made in this book, and I think this is very, very helpful. We need to understand or believe wholeheartedly that our spouse is fundamentally a good person and they love us, right? The golden rule, give everybody the benefit of the doubt. So my wife's not being disrespectful because she's a bad person and she's trying to be disrespectful. She wants to be respectful. I'm not failing to show her the proper love because I just decided I don't want to show her love. I've done something. I'm off track. Fundamentally, I don't want to hurt her. I would never intend to hurt her, and she would never intend to hurt me. And so if you take that particular mindset into it, instead of every little thing that they do is blown out of proportion because, oh man, my husband's just a jerk. I mean, he doesn't have any care for me whatsoever, blah, 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 blah. And so I think that helps. We have to believe that. And we also need to understand a lot of very, very important points. Let's just go ahead and get to this point B here, under section 1, a wife's calling. So let's fill in the blanks there. Submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. This is voluntary, not forced. Submission is to your own husband, not necessarily all men in the same way. It's a choice to honor his leadership, not an admission of being inferior in any way, shape, or form. Verse 23 says the husband is head of the wife. Headship means responsibility. Sort of the buck stops here. He's got to make some decisions after a lot of discussion and talking, but sometimes the decision has to land with him. And Christ's headship is the model of this. I mean, this isn't the first time that anyone's been told to love someone like Christ loved them, is it? Can you think of another time where that happened? When Jesus was talking to his disciples, right? Love one another as I have loved you. It puts it on a very high calling. So husbands need to ask ourselves constantly, am I loving my wife as Christ loved the church? And the wife has to ask the question, is she respecting her husband as she's been asked to by God or commanded to by God? We're going to talk about the husbands next, but I want to make this point because it makes it in the book. And I think it's very important. These books might be house to house one day. I don't know. But I think this is an important concept. How many of you women have proven throughout the course of your entire marriage always to be lovable. Let's see. Right. When you weren't lovable, did you want your husband to love you anyway? Right? I don't know that we ever view this way, though. Love isn't necessarily earned. We're saying that. It's unconditional love. It's not earned all the time. I think respect's the same way. We're quick to say respect has to be earned. And there's truth to that, to some degree. But how many of you men can say that you've always acted in a way in your marriage where you've always deserved to be respected? But did you want your wife to respect you anyway? I mean, it's not an earned thing. It's like, all right, men have to earn respect, but women don't have to earn love, and it's conditional. We're making this thing way out of balance. So it's women don't have to earn love. Their husbands are giving it to them because they made that commitment to give it to them, even in the times of their marriage where their wife isn't acting very lovable. And a wife is still supposed to respect her husband throughout the marriage, even if their husband isn't acting in a way that necessarily deserves her respect in that moment. And another issue is, I was thinking about this, because I know there's been a lot of times in our marriage where I haven't been respectable. I just have, in a moment, maybe longer than a moment, there's times where I just haven't been someone that Shelley could easily respect. But she still has the responsibility to do that. But as I was thinking about this, everybody, for the most part, especially someone that you chose to marry, there has to be something you can focus on an area in which they deserve respect. It may not be across the board all the time, but there's got to be something. And so I was just thinking, all the presidents in my lifetime, what I can vaguely remember, going back to Ford, all the way up, I can think of something worthy of respect in all those presidents. Every single one of them. I can think of something worthy of respect, and I can admire in all of them. So surely, if you do have a husband who a lot of times isn't living in a way that you can say, hey, he's easy to respect, you can look for those particular moments where he is worthy of respect and build from there. Does that make sense? So instead of focusing on all these things, he doesn't deserve my respect here, he doesn't deserve my respect for this, and just go over here for a few minutes and say, all right, he's still here. I mean, if that's the only thing, that's what you got to start with. He's still here. He's working to provide for the family. Whatever the case may be, he's good with the children. Whatever it is, start focusing on that particular aspect of it. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm just going to say this. Question number one. Wives, what does respect look like in a daily practice, especially when you disagree with your husband's decisions? The experienced wives probably have too much experience to actually talk about this, but we're going to try to get some experienced wives maybe to bring out some things. What does respecting your husband look like in times where he's doing something that you don't agree with, or he's not acting in a respectful way necessarily? How does that look? Because if you don't answer, I'm going to ask the men how it should look. They're going to answer. All right, men, how should that look? To you, how should that look? How would you want your wives to treat you in a respectful way when you have a tough, challenging decision to make and you know your wife disagrees with the decision you're going to make? Or you had a bad day and you weren't acting very respectful or loving, or you weren't respectable. How would you want your wife to treat you in those moments and in those times? How would you want her to come across to you? All right? Raise your hand if you have a comment. We got Phil here.
Yeah, I think what I'd want most is for her to understand that I want to be the kind of husband that she can respect. I really want that. And I want her to know that I'm going to try to do it, make the right decisions in the right way, and consider more than just my viewpoint on it. I try to ask her for input. I usually don't have to ask because she's thought about it much longer than I have when it comes to making decisions, and she has a little more time for that. I'm more focused during the day, other things. One of the things I'd say about marriage that I didn't understand at first was when I got married, I didn't understand that I was actually marrying a person that was like my mother-in-law. And she was going to marry a man that was much like her future father-in-law. And I didn't understand how much that comes into the marriage and how that colors the marriage and how that maybe respect or lack of respect maybe comes from that family background.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, a couple of really good points there. If you're in a position, if you as a man have to make a final decision in something, and you know your wife disagrees, it could be challenging. And I want her to know that I'm not taking this decision lightly, and I'm not discounting or discrediting anything that she's brought into this discussion. I just have to make a decision, and I want her to know that I'm making it with the best intent, her best interest at heart, even though it may not seem like it at that particular point. That I want her to have that confidence that even if I don't make the right decision, even if it's a decision that is in doubt realm, I want her to say, I know that he was trying to make the best decision for me and our family. I don't have to question that whatsoever, and that's how I want her to do. Oh, all right. We were just joking about that earlier.
It'll be short. I keep it behind closed doors. If I don't agree with him, I will not share with anybody, kids or anybody that I disagree with him. We'll discuss it behind closed doors, but I have his back in front of everybody.
You have an example of that? I'm just telling you, you can't share it. Rebuttal.
I joke around about this a lot, but in all seriousness, I've thought about this. I've thought about this a lot, and that's a command that God has given wives is to see to it that they respect their husband, and that's tough. That is absolutely tough, and I've got a lot of respect for my wife. Respected me for decisions where I probably didn't deserve that, but I just wanted to kind of voice my my support, both in my wife and wives in general for doing this, and it's part of God's plan. Respect is what men absolutely have to have. They need it, and if when women you can watch when a woman does not respect her husband, the husband then disengages.
What happens.
He almost goes lifeless at that point.
Stonewall.
Yep. Exactly.
If I feel disrespectful for something, I put a wall up. I leave the room. I go for a walk, go for a drive. It's just like now there's a barrier, and that's that cycle. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we got to learn to break that cycle. So if I know that, hey, I'm feeling like stonewalling here because I'm not feeling respected, instead of stonewalling, then I got to maybe say, I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't responding in love.
Right.
And that could just let her realize how I felt in that particular moment without, hey, how dare you treat me that way? Right. So there's and we're all human. This isn't going to be no one's perfect, right? Rachel?
I have two things. One of them is like just being able to check in with him, and with decisions that you have to make, and especially if it's like financial decisions, or if there's something that's life changing, just making sure that you're talking to him and checking in with him, and because you can't just consider, you have to factor in everything with your spouse, and I think that that's really important. And then the second thing is, it slipped my mind. It's listening to your husband and his even if it's a minor request, like how to specifically fold laundry or something like that. But just those small things, just listening to him and, the things that,
So who knew how to fold towels and who didn't? Shelly had to teach me how to fold a towel her way. And I just, what? That's the way she wants a towel folded. That's why I fold a towel. No big deal. So I think there are those discussion moments. But here is another point that what Rachel brings up, I think is important, is if you respect your husband, you are going to engage him in the decision-making process, because that's a lot of responsibility to have. And most husbands, I think, most Christian husbands, most husbands that are in this room are going to want the engagement and want the discussion to make it the best possible, because he married you for a reason. All right, he married you. You're smart, and he admires your way of looking at things, and so he needs your input on this. You fill him. You were made in a way that you're a helper. You complement him. You fill in gaps. And if he's going by himself, making decisions all on his own without input from you, you're both going to suffer, and your children are going to suffer. So I think respect is not just letting him make it without your input. Respect is giving input and trying to help him avoid making bad decisions as those decisions come up. Does that make sense? I see a lot of men nodding their head on that, like, yes, yeah, that's true. You know, we want to engage, we want to have conversations, and we want input, and we want that to be, that's important. You're important to us. Jason?
Someone made a point, and I just want to emphasize it more broadly. She said she didn't engage in disagreement other than behind closed doors. I think that's very important in the husband-wife relationship, and yes, I'm not married, but I witnessed a few marriages, including one that lasted in excess of 50 years. Well, I've witnessed several that in excess of 50 years, but you don't denigrate each other publicly. And in this day and age of social media, I have seen too many spouses abuse each other on social media and air things that should only be behind closed doors. Mom always told me that her and Dad didn't always agree on our punishments. I wish you were a little stronger voice sometimes, Mom. But she only disagreed with him behind closed doors. And I'm sure she ameliorated some of what Dad wanted our punishments to be behind closed doors. But when they came out together, they were together, and they were a united front. Spouses denigrating each other publicly in front of other people, I think, do as much or more damage than anything. When it's behind closed doors, it's between the two of you. When you lay it out there, you've got embarrassment, shames, all kinds of things coming into play that I think can create damage. Even if it doesn't cause damage immediately, those feelings can fester and fester. And folks, you can only swallow those emotions for so long before they're going to come out. And when they come out, it's usually not pretty. So I just wanted to emphasize that don't denigrate one another in public.
Yeah. We shouldn't be even thinking badly about our spouses. There was a show, I'll just tell you just real quickly before we move on to the men. There was a show that the kids used to watch when they were younger. It was called Good Luck Charlie. Anybody ever see that show? And I was watching that show one time, and I said, man, all they do is make the dad look like an idiot. And so for a while, I just, no more. You can't watch this show anymore, because if you watch a show or commercials or whatever, everything that makes the dad look incompetent all the time, what's their view going to become of their own dad sometimes? So you want to be careful. Same goes, I think maybe Phil was bringing that up a little bit, and I appreciate that. If you marry into a family where the mother is constantly belittling the husband, you have to be careful about that. What did my wife learn from her mother about how she talks to her husband? And so be very careful about that. So if you're raising kids right now, how you are talking to your husband and how you are talking to your wife and how you're treating one another is going to lay the foundation for how they will talk and treat their spouses. So it's a huge responsibility. You got to make sure that we're watching that. All right, so let's go ahead and move to the husband's responsibility. Like I said, maybe we'll have another class where it's focused all on marriage for an entire quarter, and we can have some more discussions about how this looks in real life. So the husband's calling is to love his wife. So just as important as respect is to a husband, love is to a wife. And a wife, it might question your love as much as you would question her respect for you at times. And so she has to be reassured often that you do have love for her, not only in words, but in action. So husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church. He gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her. They must love their wives as they love their own bodies. No one ever, usually you don't do harm to your own body, right? You nourish and cherish. And so that's the other. You are to nourish and cherish your wife as your own body. So here comes our discussion question number 2 then. And it is husbands who have been married 25 plus years. How many of you have been married over 25 years? Raise your hand if you've been married. All right, look at that. We got a pretty good group of people that have been married over 25 years. You can start us off in this. Phil started us a little bit on this. What kind of misunderstanding did you have when you first got married, especially in this idea of loving your wife as Christ loved the church? And how has your understanding of sacrificial love matured over the years? I thought it was always going to be easy. Just like raising kids. I thought it was a piece of cake, you know. My mom and dad did a great job, and look at me. Yeah, I didn't cause any problems. Shelley was a good person, surely. Just by process of us being where we are, our kids, raising our kids is going to be. So I think sometimes the unrealistic expectations sometimes enter on both men and women, but mostly women have unrealistic expectations of what their marriage is going to be like. You agree with that or not agree with that? Or you just can't believe I said it? Which of those? All right, we'll have Joe first.
So I guess it depends on when you marry as well, where your station of life. For Susan and I, at least in how I saw it, is when we married, we were in college. And so you would think that was, complicated because you got to, do your homework, blah, blah, blah. But I think the misunderstanding as I look back would have been that how simple it was. You start trying to get jobs, you start trying to get a house, or you start layering on things. And usually we talked a lot about stuff before they came along, but there's things that we didn't. I think that's for everybody. That's not just for us. Children come along, in a variety of things. How at least initially, I don't know if it was misunderstood. It's just for me being ignorant of the complexity that occurs within a marriage when you start layering on stuff when you're not 22 years old, but you're, I don't know, pick your age, so many years down the road. And because of that, it creates a lot of stress and a lot of strain, and it goes back to the fundamentals of the respect and love. That will make things a lot better 25 years down the road from day X when you got married. But that's not understanding that complexity, the layered complexity as you go down the road.
That's a good point. That's sort of what the point that I was trying to make. You made it much better than I did, and that is underestimating just how complex life was going to get. You don't know what life is going to be in front of you. So you never had kids. You don't know what kind of stress that's going to put on your marriage. You don't assume financial problems when you get married, right? You think everything's going to be perfect and great the whole time. But then when those financial problems come, now you have a test. And so all those, you lose a job, all this stuff, it just adds a layer of complexity, layers and layers and layers of complexity that makes it harder to focus as much on your spouse as you want to. That's why the foundation is so important. Understand that these are things that you made from day one, commitments. The other thing that I was thinking about as we've been talking about this over the last couple of weeks is I underestimated just how serious Satan wants to destroy good marriages. It's just like, he's out for you. I mean, he wants to destroy your marriage. He wants to put these thoughts in your head that your husband doesn't love you or your wife doesn't respect you. And he's going to amplify as much as he can all these issues and make life harder and harder and harder and harder and harder. Think about this. What would be the best way for Satan to destroy people? Destroy marriages. What is the greatest way to destroy a church? To destroy marriages. What is the greatest way to destroy a society? To destroy marriages. And so why wouldn't he be spending a lot of his time on this? And I guess I didn't think about that way when I first got married, and you sort of learned through the process that, man, Satan isn't letting up at all. He's continuing on over and over and over and over again.
I hope there is a shortcut, but there hasn't been for me. I'm not sure there's a shortcut except experience here, but sacrifice is a real word. And it's a very serious word, and it takes, for some of us, a long time to learn what that means, what it looks like.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Thank you. All right, any of you ladies want to jump in? Like I let you jump in. All right, we have a couple more over here. We got Phil. All right, Phil, and then you ladies want to jump in. What would that look like? What did my husband misunderstand that he should have understood at the time? It hasn't learned yet.
Well, I said this to my my oldest son the night before he got married. We all assembled in a hotel room, and we were in Hawaii. And I felt I needed, as a father, to share this in front of my future daughter-in-law and her parents. I said, marriage is a perfect design, but the people in it aren't. We sinned and we're flawed. So I said, we're not going to be able to work this arrangement out perfectly. And I think that's what love and forgiveness and understanding is all about. But as far as I'm concerned, many years ago when I got married, I understood what the love of Christ was. I'd studied that from my Bible since I was 12, and that's the kind of love I wanted to give my wife. When I got married, I was hungry for love from a wife. I'd never really experienced. Some people have come from very loving families where there's a lot of open expression of that's seen within the family. And sometimes that love of a mother is so sweet to their son, it's very hard for them to see beyond that. That's been so good, and it's hard to leave their parents behind and then start this new one with this new goal of marrying people like Christ. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think if the two people coming into the relationship have healthy backgrounds of love that they come into, it's going to make it easier for them to love one another. If not, there's going to be an issue.
And that goes back to what we talked about in the very first lesson. What is the best thing you can do for your marriage is love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. So if both of you love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, then there's not as much pressure to be perfect and to perform and to do everything right. And it's going to cover a bunch of stuff, right? It's going to cover a bunch of issues that we are coming. Because if you know that your wife loves God more than she loves you, and if you're, as a wife, your husband loves God more than he loves you, that's going to allow you to ride through some of these storms when your husband or wife they're not acting the way that you think they should, because they're going to come back to center. Right? We've all done this. We've all messed up. And in the moment, maybe we double down. And then we double down again. And then a day later, or maybe just a couple hours later, you're out, doing something away from your spouse. You're like, man, I bombed that so bad. And you come back to center, which is your love for God, which allows you to go and apologize and say, you know what, I bombed that. I acted totally inappropriate toward you, and I am very sorry. And so forgiveness is, as he pointed out. How many of you have never had to forgive your spouse? We've all had to forgive our spouses multiple times. Randy?
Yeah. Even in verse 1 of chapter 5, it talks about imitating God. And, Jesus taught us how to live. Jesus was the suffering servant. So, and I know I suffer when I don't love Debbie, I'm miserable and I'm suffering, And so, and I'm more and more, I need to see how, he said it's greater to give than to receive. So I just need to learn, give more, and when I suffer, understand that's being more like God. That in that I can learn to be more like God. Suffering teaches us a lot if we think about it while we're in it. And so more and more, I just feel the need to learn more about God, how He loved, what He gave to us.
Or in this passage, Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Jesus love your wife as Christ loved the church. When you know more about that, then you're going to know how this interact, how this works.
And He gave so much that way more than I have to give. So I just need to give. And I can't quite put it into the words I want.
Well, I think there's a good point there. One good point that you made out of there is we have to keep asking God to help us feel miserable when we're not treating our spouse properly. I mean, that would be a powerful prayer. Help me know that, and so that I can respond, I can change. Because nobody here, I can't say nobody, but I would say for the most part, the people who are here today, maybe even listening online, we want to treat our spouse properly. We mess up, but deep down we want to. And so being reminded by God allowing that to hurt us when we don't, like you suffer when you don't love Debbie the way you're supposed to, that's a powerful thing to get us back on track. So help me feel guilty when I should feel guilty. Help me feel like, hey, something's just not right. Something's just not right. What do I need to do out of this? All right, so there's a couple more supporting passages there, and I think it's letter D there. 1 Peter 3, 1 through 7. Wives win husbands through chaste or godly conduct, right? Husbands live with wives with understanding. And in that passage, it talks about wives can win their husbands over. Some of the translations say fear. Some say with respectful behavior. All right, so that's how even sometimes you can't throw your hands up in the air and say, my husband deserves no respect. We talked about that. Look for the areas which you can respect him. But there's also this idea that if you treat that person respectfully, even when they don't deserve it, in the long haul, that's not guaranteed, but in the long haul, that can make a huge impact on him. Colossians 3, 18 through 19, wives submit, husbands love your wives, and do not be bitter toward them. Proverbs 31, 28, 29, the excellent wife is praised by both her husband and her child. So question number 3 there, Ephesians 5 begins with submitting to one another. How does this mutual submission work alongside the distinct roles described in verses 22 and 23? Anybody want to comment on that? I want to give you a chance for it. If not, we're going to look at one more question before we... All right, so all these examples that I have listed here for you, what did you learn most from all those examples? I said, whatever example you want to talk about, what did you learn most in the negative or the positive side? We have a bunch of them here. We have Isaac and Rebekah. We have Elkanah and Hannah. We have Joseph and Mary. In the negative examples, we have Nabal and Abigail, Ahab and Jezebel, and Job and his wife. Any of those that, as you were reading them, say, hey, that's interesting. I'd like to talk about that. All right, Joe has one. Ahab and Jezebel sort of show it. If you don't get out of the crazy cycle and you encourage one another in bad behavior, one person can cause a lot of problems, but when you go into cahoots with another person for evil purposes, then the two of you together could really cause a lot of problems. Joe?
Joseph and Mary, this is an interesting situation within the context. Joseph has the right to divorce her. But just because he has the right to divorce her, he chose not to. That's really powerful. Just because you have the right to do something within the context, to step back and say, just because I have the right, should I do that? Is that ultimately the godly thing, the good thing to do?
But it wasn't just that. It was also, if I am going to put her away,
how am I going to do it?
How am I going to do it in a way that doesn't ruin her life?
In other words, I guess that's what I'm saying. Joseph, in this case, chose not to do it. But if he was going to do it, he's going to do it. Think about it. Divorce his wife. He's going to do it in the best way possible for the woman he's going to divorce.
Yeah. You wonder why God chose the two of them? That may be one, why God chose Joseph in this situation.
That's huge.
Because he was a just man.
Because, nowadays it's like, somebody was saying, it's all over, Facebook and all, it's all over the place.
It's like, I don't want to get divorced from you. I want to ruin you in the
process. I want to ruin you,
your
family, the kids, everything.
Reputation, whatever.
It's just opposite.
Have that idea. The other thing that you really that strikes me in some of this is, especially with Isaac and Rebekah, they didn't choose each other. All right, Abraham sent his servant out to find a wife for Isaac, and yet they still, had to live the way that God wanted them to live. And I just think, man, if God expects two people that were put together, maybe for not the purest of motives on family members' parts or one another's parts, and he still expects us to act this way in an arranged marriage, I chose my wife and she chose me. And so that puts us, I think, 10 steps ahead of where they were, and God still respected that. Now, we did talk that as we go through our life, we're going to become different people. And that's another adjustment that you have to make. You're not married to the same person you married 25 years ago. And neither are they. You're different people. Life has changed you. Some of the complexities of life that Joe pointed out has changed you. All right, everybody, thanks a lot. A question for Wednesdays are in the back.